Okay, thanks ever so much, Laura. So as Laura says, this is the first in a series of Demystifying Accreditation webinars. And today's webinar aims to provide information from ourselves that will help yourselves understand why accreditation exists, how an organisation may go about obtaining accreditation. Hopefully the information is of interest to people who are employed by an accredited organisation but are not directly involved in the accreditation process, and also people who want to seek accreditation for their organisations. So hopefully it'll give a bit of background information about what accreditation means and why it's so important. As Laura said, my name's Kristel Smith and I am an accreditation specialist within the development and scheme integrity section of UKAS. I've been with UKAS 10 years. A vast majority of that time was spent in the healthcare section, accrediting organisations to a variety of healthcare standards. But obviously the last 2 years I've been within development. So hopefully we should be able to answer all of your questions. If there's any questions that we can't answer, we'll take them away and then we'll get back to you. So, what is, or who are UKAS? What is accreditation? What's the value of accreditation? What does our assessment process look like? How do you apply? And then what's the journey of accreditation? So hopefully we'll be able to cover all of those topics for you today. So who are UKAS? So we are the sole national accreditation body for the United Kingdom. We are recognised and appointed by government to assess against agreed standards for organisations that provide services which include certification, testing, inspecting, calibration and validation and verification. We were founded in a previous kind of make-up in 1966, but were then consolidated as UKAS in 1995. In 1996, we merged NAMAS, which was the National Measurement Accreditation Service, with the NACCB, which was the National Accreditation Council for Certification Bodies. And obviously we've developed over the years to become the UKAS that exists today. We're a not-for-profit organisation. Any profit that is generated is driven back into the organisation via development projects, etc., to enable accreditation processes to grow. We've got over 2,900 accredited customers. I think at last count we were over that 3,000 mark, and we provide to those customers around 32,500 assessment days per annum across all of the fields mentioned above, certification, testing, etc. We have around 330 full-time staff, and we also contract in around 700 experts in the technical areas to provide us with that technical expertise. As part of public authority activity, UKAS has been provided with the privilege and remit to undertake its national accreditation body status, and we operate under a memorandum of understanding with the government through what's currently the Department for Business and Trade. And that memorandum of understanding lays out the standards that we can assess to and the areas in the market that we can accredit. So this slide's just to provide an illustration of kind of the breadth and variety of government departments and other stakeholders that we work with in order to develop a robust accreditation service, excuse me, that adequately represents the growing and development interests of the nation. To ensure that UKAS delivers an effective, technically competent and professional service, it makes sure that all stakeholders' views, concerns, any future priorities there may be are fed into the strategic planning process through mechanisms like our Policy Advisory Forum and Council, as well as technical advisory committees, so we're kept up to date with the latest kind of regulatory requirements, guidance, etc., and that all supports our approach to assessment. Our work supported by policymakers in government departments, agencies and regulators to explore how accreditation can be used to support the application of better risk-based, outcome-focused policies. And as previously mentioned, this is delivered through the councils and forums that we sit on. There are also some steering groups which we partake in to ensure effective and efficient delivery of accreditation. For example, we've currently got a healthcare and a fourth industrial revolution steering group to help us progress in those areas. So what is accreditation and how does UKAS fit into this? So this slide shows the symbols of accreditation, which are UKAS marks that our accredited organisations can display if they choose to signify that they've been granted accreditation. It also hopefully shows the wide variety of accredited activities available, which serve many different industry and sectors. The sectors that UKAS do accredit is ever evolving, and at any one time we've got probably over 50 or 60 new accreditation scheme projects gone through development with the hope that they then become part of our operational activity. As you can see, we've got as well as the things mentioned earlier, like calibration, inspection and testing, we do reference materials, proficiency testing, biobanking, product certification, amongst others. So what is the chain of accreditation? So UKAS has a remit to provide a world of confidence in the products and services that the public relies upon. Accreditation also helps facilitate national and international trade in a way that gives confidence, trust and assurance to the consumers, which ultimately then use the products and services that are subject to accreditation worldwide. So at the top, we have UKAS accreditation, and UKAS accreditation is underpinned by peer evaluation of ourselves, by European accreditation and indeed international accreditation. So we also get assessed to ensure that we are fit to be the national accreditation body. Using international and other standards, we then go on to provide conformity assessment in the areas mentioned earlier. Also taking into account any regulatory requirements and schemes that may exist out there in those areas of market to provide product and service accreditation and assurances, and that's across people, management systems, equipment, organisations, products, etc. Obviously, underpin that confidence, trust, and assurance that we seek. So UKAS delivers the assurance, as said, through its ability to be national accreditation body, and through that we are evaluated against ISO 17011, which is the standard that all national accreditation bodies must meet. So what is accreditation? So accreditation is the attestation and formal recognition by an accreditation body of the competence, impartiality and integrity of a conformity assessment body to perform a specific task or activity to the relevant standard that it's chosen to be accredited to. A conformity assessment body is a generic term that could, for example, be a certification body, a laboratory that does testing or calibration, a people proficiency provider, an inspection company, and others. Obviously, specific standards on the right-hand side here are what we accredit or seek to accredit that organisation against. And what that'll do will assess the applicant against these requirements of the standard and check their processes. It can then be further broken down into activities such as a specific test or type of inspection. So just a little slide to kind of point out the difference between accreditation and certification, because sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing, and they shouldn't be. Accreditation isn't certification. What accreditation does is it performs an oversight role that underpins the quality, impartiality, and competence of the certification and other conformity assessment activities within the process. Certification is an audit of whether an organisation, product, or individual conforms to the criteria laid out in a recognised standard or scheme, such as ISO 9001 quality management systems. So a certification body will be auditing the processes and systems of an organisation that wishes to gain certification, whereas UKAS and other accreditation bodies across the globe will check the checkers, ensuring that the certification bodies are meeting their accreditation criteria and providing a service that can be relied upon. So what does accreditation offer? So many businesses and organisations, such as government department and other public sector bodies, use accreditation status as a selection criteria when evaluating external services and suppliers. As such, accreditation can offer a competitive edge over obviously other organisations that you were seeking to do business with. Various schemes, sectors, and industries may even have mandatory requirements for service providers to be accredited before they are able to perform the processes they're aiming to achieve. Without holding without holding accreditation, some organisations may find that they are unable to provide or deliver key services in the UK or the wider market. Some examples of this are that forensic services in the UK need to be accredited to ISO 17020 for scene of crime examination, ISO 17025 for fingerprint comparison, body fluid recovery, etc. And as well as needing to be accredited to these standards, they're also reviewed against the Forensic Science Regulators Code of Practice. So the benefits, as said, of UKAS assessment and accreditation that we underpin the UK and global infrastructure with our independence and expertise, creating trust and confidence in the products and services we all rely upon. And there's just some statistics to the left-hand side there with regards to survey results, etc., where 93% of people agreed that accreditation provided confidence to the customers and indeed to the market. During the accreditation process, through assessment, a conformity assessment body must demonstrate sufficient ability to evaluate and manage the risk within their organisation. This helps to support an organisation's assurance for its customers and clients through the dynamic management of risk. Within accreditation, we're also part of an international network, and this is an international network of accreditation to ensure that equivalence and acceptance of results can remove technical barriers to trade. So if you have accreditation in the UK, that will be recognised in other places in the world as equivalent to their national accreditation body's accreditation. The idea is tested, inspected, or certified once, accepted everywhere. And there's mutual recognition agreements in place with other international accreditation bodies, and these are at two different levels. First one is this technical recognition between accreditation bodies, which means that accredited conformity assessment of signatories of the multilateral agreement can be recognised by other members of the signatories of multilateral agreements. Hence the acceptance of products and services across national borders. The second is that there's bilateral agreements between states, with the objective being to promote trade in goods between nations by facilitating market access and aim to benefit industry by providing easier access to conformity assessment. So UKAS is the United Kingdom member of a number of international and European bodies, the IEF, which is the International Accreditation Forum, ILAC, which is the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation. These two organisations have very recently merged into an international accreditation organisation. They haven't separated out laboratory from the rest of accreditation now. And the European Cooperation for Accreditation, of which we're a member. So over the next few slides, we'll outline the key parts of the assessment process. So UKAS expects potential applicants to have implemented an active management system with demonstration of the following evidence, including but not limited to suitable coverage of internal audits, robust complaint handling and management of non-conforming work, effective implementation of corrective and preventive actions, and active engagement with your users, customers and clients, and objective demonstration of feedback from these areas and outcomes. There may be other aspects as required by your relevant standard that you're applying for, and any scheme framework requirements that may be outlined in documents, standards or publications, and we would expect that organisations seeking accreditation to have a level of awareness of these elements. Some signposts in these publications will be outlined in the application process later. So we have the preparation, as said, where obviously you're looking at your own processes. Once you feel you've prepared and your application is sent into UKAS and accepted by UKAS, you get assigned a dedicated assessment manager, or AM as we term them. Your AM will support and guide you through the accreditation process and will be with you throughout the whole process. As part of this process, your assessment manager will propose an optional preliminary pre-assessment. It's highly recommended and for you to consider, and it's especially useful if you're new to UKAS accreditation. In most cases, this will involve some form of on-site assessment activity with a combination of both kind of off-site document review ahead of the assessment, potentially some remote assessment of your systems, and interviewing of people with key responsibilities within your organisation. Pre-assessments are a really good way of highlighting gaps in areas of conformance with the standard that you're seeking to be accredited to, and allow you to iron out any potential problems, and it helps the organisation identify what we call showstoppers, and these are areas that could prevent you from gaining accreditation if you progress directly to initial assessment. Just as importantly, it will help you to understand the accreditation process and what to expect. Apologies. And what to expect as you move through the accreditation process and what your initial assessment will look like. This is the stage at which an applicant customer begins to develop their relationship with UKAS personnel and to become familiar with the UKAS process overall. The pre-assessment doesn't raise any findings, but what it will do is provide you with an overview of your management system and your activities you conduct, and highlight any areas that need to be addressed. So the next stage is initial assessment. So what we'll say is obviously UKAS expects that potential applicants will have implemented and be actively working on a management system that demonstrates the following evidence, as mentioned previously: internal audits, complaints, non-conforming work, corrective and preventive actions, the kind of risk management areas, and that engagement with your users and your customers. And what we do on initial assessment is we come in and we look at your areas that you're seeking accreditation for. We'll go through all of your processes against the requirements of the standard. We'll directly witness any activity that you're seeking accreditation for and your scope of activities that you perform. And we interview staff, we look at records, discussions with people as to how your processes work. Throughout that process, what we'll do is if there's any non-conformities with the requirements of the standard, we will raise them as findings and we'll discuss them with yourself so you know where them gaps are. And then it's up to yourselves to propose an improvement action that will satisfy the clearance of that non-conformance. Post initial assessment, we leave you with a recommendation, which is either yes, we feel you're ready to progress to grant of accreditation, or actually you're not ready yet and there's more work needs to be done by yourselves, at which point we'll then come back and do further visits once you've had the time to fix your systems. With regards to the findings, at initial assessment, you get 12 weeks to provide evidence to UKAS, which we then review and have a backwards and forwards with yourself about either, yes, this evidence is suitable and we've cleared that finding, or actually we need a little bit more objective evidence. And that backwards and forwards goes on until we're satisfied and that evidence is cleared. Once the evidence is cleared, the report that will provide yourself and any findings and indeed any evidence of clearance of findings is put before an independent decision maker within UKAS. Now, this independent decision maker stage is to check the integrity of the assessment and indeed the breadth and depth to ensure that all technical requirements of the standard and all QMS areas of the standard have been assessed in the correct depth and that the evidence provided for yourself was suitable to clear those findings. And that gives a second level of assurance that it's been looked at by someone who wasn't part of the original assessment team and they also concur with your recommendation. So assuming all of that's okay and everything's gone right, we obviously then move on to grant of accreditation. So before your accreditation is granted, you will be sent an offer of accreditation letter, a draft copy of your schedule of accreditation. Now, this schedule of accreditation contains the scope of activities we've looked at. So if you perform 10 tests and we looked at all 10 tests and we offered accreditation for 10 tests, those 10 tests will be on your schedule of accreditation to show your customer that that's what you've achieved accreditation for. There's also an estimate of cost and assessment days that will be required for the ongoing accreditation process. Now, this is known as the 4-year cycle, and I'll just discuss that in a little bit depth further on. To continue with the grant of accreditation, you'll need to review your draft schedule, and the form at the end of the offer of accreditation letter will need to be completed, signed, dated and returned to UKAS, and if required, any outstanding fees would need to be paid. Once all the documentation is received and the recommendations are accepted, the decision maker then grants accreditation and your 4-year cycle would commence. You'll receive a grant of accreditation letter and a verifiable accreditation e-certificate, which can be scanned by any of your clients to provide them with the confidence in your accreditation, and it also protects your accreditation status. The schedule of accreditation will then be uploaded to the UKAS website, which will also allow prospective clients to view when they're looking to evaluate services they're wishing to take on as a service they'll use. You also receive the relevant symbols, as mentioned earlier, the little white symbols, and you can use these on correspondence, reports, etc. There's a document governing the use of those symbols, but you do get that when you get granted accreditation. So the ongoing assessment, what does that look like? So if we look at the latter end of the overview of the accreditation process, I've already talked through the application, pre-assessment, and what an initial assessment looks like. You're then granted at this stage, and then you come into what we call our 4-year cycle. So this is a surveillance cycle. So you're granted accreditation. Within 6 months of grant of accreditation, you will have your first surveillance. So you'll have surveillance 1. Then a year from that date, you'll have your surveillance 2. A year from that date, your surveillance 3. And a year from that date is your year 4, which we call the reassessment year. And the aim is at initial assessment, we look at everything. We look at your entire scope of activities. Over years 1, 2, and 3, we'll split those activities down into 3 bite-sized chunks, and we cover them over the course of that. At reassessment, we look at them all again on the same assessment. That provides assurances that across the 4-year cycle, we've looked at everything again, and we're assured that the processes and the technical activities are working well. So how do you get started? So applying for accreditation. First, you must have a copy of the standard and familiarise yourself with the requirements of that standard, and be aware how any of the requirements of the standard can potentially impact your service. The standards can be published from sources such as BSI and ISO, which are the British Standard Institute and the International Standard Organisation. Some standards, such as the imaging standard and the physiological services standard, are freely available, and you can get them from the UKAS website. You'll need to have undertaken a gap analysis on the current provision of your service against the standard you wish to apply for, and we will require this post-application to ensure you're ready to fulfil the accreditation requirements, and that we don't deliver an assessment that you were unable to complete because you're not ready. So the UKAS website has links to various mandatory publications such as technical policy statements, European accreditation documents, international documents that you'll need to comply with to ensure conformance. Depending on your type of service, there may also be scheme or sector requirements that you'll need to be aware of and build appropriately into your processes and services. International publications are available on the EA, IEF and ILAC websites, and you can access them. Once your application's in process, your assessment manager will also signpost some of them applicable documents as required. You need to complete the relevant application forms, ensuring the documentation is double checked prior to submission. This is to ensure that all mandatory requirements are fulfilled to prevent delay in the processing of your application. So submitted documentation usually includes the application form, accreditation category, which is more commonly known as the ASC form, and also your supporting documents as outlined and relevant to your sector. A signed UKAS agreement is required to confirm your adherence to the terms of business, and a fee is required at application stage to allow us to process this. The UKAS website does have the terms of business and the fees on there, so you can be fully aware of what you need to agree to before you sign up, so to speak. Once accepted, any financial checks have been completed, you'll then be assigned your assessment manager, who will contact you regarding your application to discuss the makeup of your organisation, the submitted documentation, and whether any further information is required to progress to assessment stage. It's also the perfect opportunity for you to raise any questions on the assessment process and to support your preparation and discuss the pre-assessment options. And that support and guidance comes throughout the 4-year cycle from your assessment manager. If you would like to find out more about how ready your organisation is to proceed with accreditation, there's a number of resources available. So we have a number of readiness self-assessment tools, and these are available on the UKAS website. There's a list there of the standards that the readiness assessment tools are available for. And what it is a self-assessment tool that has a set of questions which is designed to allow organisations to check their current policies and systems against the expectations of the standard, the relevant standard. Against each criteria, there's 3 potential responses: yes, no, and somewhat, which organisations can use to describe how closely they have met the requirements of the standard. The readiness assessment tool is best completed by an individual who has good understanding of how the organisation manages and performs its technical activity, as well as those who are responsible for quality and customer management. So they've got a good oversight of how ready the organisation is. If you complete that readiness assessment tool and submit it, a report is produced for you with what we feel is a reasonable timescale that you should be looking at. There's also help in the journey with regards to supporting UKAS publications and which ones are relevant for you to help gain accreditation. As said, international publications are available on the EA, IEF and ILAC websites. Technical content and publications from UKAS can be found on the UKAS website, and you can also sign up to receive monthly updates from UKAS, which includes information on standards, standards that are out for consultation or may have been withdrawn, any of our publications that have been updated, and what that update looks like. We also offer public and on-site training courses, as well as providing international advisory services to others. Whilst UKAS training is not a mandatory requirement for gaining accreditation, it can be useful to enhance knowledge of some of the more complex areas of the standard, or provide the tools and techniques to fill in the remaining gaps and ensure that your systems and processes are developed in line with the requirements for organisation. Our portfolio of courses provides the UK and overseas delegates with knowledge of best practice of conformity assessments, and are run by expert trainers who are committed to providing you with the knowledge and skills to add value to your organisation and therefore instill confidence to your customers. All UKAS Academy trainers are current or previous assessment managers, so there's also the opportunity to ask assessment manager specific questions in relation to the standard. Training is available in a number of formats. This includes in person, on site at your company's premises, virtual and e-learning. And there's courses that cover the whole range of areas we accredit. I said earlier, certification, healthcare, inspection, etc. So at this point, I'll hand across to Laura, who'll see if there's anything in the question and answer session. If anybody does have any questions, if they can drop them in there now, and we'll have a look at that.
Thank you very much, Kristel. That was a really nice overview of everything. I think you've wrapped up perfectly what accreditation is and what its value is, and the role that UKAS plays in that as the national accreditation body. We actually haven't had any questions, so evidently you've done a brilliant job of going through it all, as no one's got any questions. So unless anyone does want to drop something in there now, I think we are actually okay to close this. So again, I just want to thank Kristel. Thanks for your time. It's a lot of talking. It's a big topic to cover in a short webinar, but I think you've done a brilliant job of explaining everything. I also want to thank everybody who joined us today on the webinar. It is a series. We do have we've got several others coming up over the course of the next month and a half. We've got the journey to accreditation, which talks more about specifically how your application and assessment cycle will work. And then there's also a webinar on the role that the assessment managers play. And then, Kristel, I think you're with us for all of them, aren't you? Because you're on the scheme integrity one at the end as well, which talks a bit more about the recent work that you've been doing in scheme integrity. Someone's got their hands up. We can't actually enable microphones, I'm afraid. So is it possible for you to drop something in the chat if you want to say something? As we don't have microphones enabled on this session. Yeah, not sure if anyone's going to say anything else. I think no, we can't do that, I'm afraid. So I think we will leave it. Oh no, someone's put something in chat. Okay. There's in-house training. Do you offer a discount based upon numbers? Well, we're actually offering a discount at the moment, generally, which is our spring discounts. There is a 10% discount available for courses booked till the end of April. But also, yes, we do in-house sessions where we would potentially come to your premises, and that makes it, if there's a large number, it makes it more affordable. So you can certainly inquire about that. It's training@ukas.com is the best email address to get us on that. But if I can drop you an email afterwards, I'll have your details. Somebody else has asked, we have a question now, how long does it take to get to the assessment from the initial application? So I think probably a UKAS, it depends, answer might be coming your way, but I'll let Kristel go to that one.
Yeah, so as Laura says, it does depend. What it depends on is what you are seeking accreditation for. So if it's an area that we regularly accredit and we have the technical resource and expertise already within our kind of capacity, an organisation, it should be fairly quick. I would probably say you should speak to your assessment manager within a month or so of applying, and then obviously, depending on your readiness and the gap analysis and the discussions with your assessment manager, they'll then guide you on how ready they feel you are for initial assessment, or whether they feel you'd benefit from a pre-assessment first. So it does really depend on what you're asking for. What I would say is you can push for timescales. So if you've applied and there's a business critical need that you get assessed sooner rather than later, just email applications and let them know that you've already applied and there is a time sensitive nature, and you should get that assessment manager assigned to you sooner rather than later. What I would say as well is obviously, if it's within a specific area, if you look on the UKAS website, there is details as to email addresses for the specific areas as well. So, for example, if you're in construction, you can contact the construction department. If you're in healthcare, you can contact healthcare department, and just let them know that your application's in and you want that progressing quickly.
Thanks, Kristel. And we've had another question come through about the benefits of accreditation for the NHS. So this person says that, for example, medical laboratories, they can't really see the benefit of NHS medical laboratories having accreditation, because while the patient or the user may have more confidence, most of the users have no idea about UKAS accreditation. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah. So with regards to NHS accreditation, you're right. A user will come to the NHS because it's the nearest NHS to them, and that they usually have very little choice in which departments they then get to see. So they will probably be unaware that that organisation holds accreditation or doesn't. But what it does, it's the kind of behind closed doors. So if you've got UKAS accreditation, you've got people coming in with technical expertise in that area and assessing your organisation for gaps with regards to the standard. Standard is as we say, it's kind of best practice, gold standard. And if you're adherent to that standard, you are thereby providing a better service than you would if you weren't accredited to that standard. The only way you know you're adhering to that standard is if you're assessed against that standard by a third-party organisation. Because we've got organisations on a regular basis where they feel they're meeting the standard themselves, and we highlight gaps. Now, by highlighting them gaps, there's an onus on the organisation to then fix those gaps, therefore inevitably providing a more assured, accurate service than if they weren't accredited. Does that answer your question, Kim?
Hopefully it does, Kristel. So we're not allowing microphones can't be used on this particular webinar. I have answered a couple of questions by text just about whether the webinar is being recorded, and someone has asked if we have a UKAS certificate. I'm not quite sure. Do you have an accreditation certificate for UKAS? I'm not quite sure. We provide certificates of accreditation for all our accredited organisations, but if you're asking if we hold an accreditation certificate, we hold accreditation via our peer evaluation, don't we, Kristel?
Yes, we do. So UKAS is accredited to be a national accreditation body. We comply with 17011, and we've undergone this end of last year, November, wasn't it? We underwent our assessment by International Accreditation Forum, and we had a team come from all over the world and assess us and look at our assessments, and went out on assessments with us to ensure we were complying with the requirements of 17011. So we are accredited to enable us to accredit. When you become accredited, you will receive a certificate yourselves to say you were UKAS accredited, and you'll also have the logo that you can put on your certificates and reports that you send to your users, showing them that accreditation certificate. So all along the line, there's that traceability back to an international standard, be it through your users to yourselves, then yourselves to UKAS, then UKAS to international accreditation, and it's a certified process all the way.
Thank you, Kristel. There has been another question about risk-based assessments. So someone's asked, is there an option where instead of an annual surveillance, they could extend that depending on risk, volume of work, I think is the concern there. So again, I mean, I know that is something we've explored in some areas, isn't it?
Yeah. So what we have to do under our accreditation, 17011, we do have to perform surveillance assessments. Accredited organisations must undergo surveillance assessments. What we do is we do take risk-based approaches in some of the areas, and those risk-based approaches might be that we don't come on site every year. What we do is do on-site 1 year, then remote the next, then on-site, then remote. So you would still have some form of yearly assessment. We don't usually consider moving it to more than a year because of the things that can change in that time. Regulations, guidance, equipment they're using might change. They might change processes within the organisation. Therefore, we do need to have that kind of annual surveillance. But what that looks like absolutely can be formed from a risk-based approach. What we do is normally we wouldn't do that risk-based approach until a few years in the accreditation, because we need to get those assurances first that the organisation is managing their systems well enough to enable us to do remote visits, some years instead of on-site visits. But yeah, we do that in some areas.
Thank you. And someone has also asked, well, they said they're working their way currently through the assessment readiness template, and are asking if they should follow that up. If they should complete that readiness assessment before they follow up.
I would. It's a really, really good tool, and the report that you get at the end does give you an idea of readiness. Um, what I would say is if you want to apply, um, regardless of your readiness, you can do that, and you can also have those discussions with your assessment manager. But primarily, that I would submit that readiness tool first, because what happens is if you apply and you're not yet ready, and you won't be ready for a while, you can't sit on our books indefinitely, if you like, without having that assessment. Um, so the nearer you are to readiness for that assessment, the better.
Okay. Well, quite a few questions that came in at the end there, but we are at the end of them now. So thanks for that, Kristel. And thank you again to everyone who participated. And as I say, we've recorded the session. It will be shared probably next week. We'll get an email out with the recording on it. So I shall close the meeting at that point. But thank you once again.
Okay, thanks everyone.